Day 61, verses 39 to 41, Protecting Our Wisdom. Namaste and welcome to Gita 360. Yesterday, we reflected on how desire can slowly pull us away from what we know to be right and cloud our ability to see clearly. Today, the Gita continues that conversation and takes us one step further. It explains why desire can be so difficult to overcome and where the struggle quietly begins within us. The knowledge of even the most discerning gets covered by this perpetual enemy in the form of insatiable desire, which is never satisfied and burns like fire, O son of Kunti. The Gita describes desire as something that is difficult to satisfy. Its nature is to keep asking for more. One wish fulfilled often creates another. One achievement leads to another goal. One expectation gives rise to another expectation. This does not mean that ambition, dreams, or aspirations are wrong. Human life naturally involves wanting, growing, and striving. The problem begins when we start believing that fulfillment always lies somewhere ahead of us, waiting in the next achievement, the next possession, the next stage of life, or the next outcome we desire. The mind then begins living in a state of constant seeking. For a brief moment, satisfaction appears, but it often does not last for long. The search begins again. Slowly, we become so occupied with what is missing that we stop recognizing what is already present. We do not heed our wisdom because it gets overtaken by desire. The senses, mind, and intellect are the breeding grounds of desire. Through them, it clouds one's knowledge and dilutes the embodied soul. The Gita now explains where desire operates. It works through our senses, through what we see, hear, experience, and encounter around us. From there, it enters the mind, where thoughts begin growing and then influences the intellect, the very part of us that is meant to guide our judgment. This often happens quietly. A passing thought remains in the mind a little longer. A comparison begins taking root. A desire occupies more space than it should. Gradually, something that once felt small begins influencing how we think, react, and choose. And through these very entry points desire entered from, it clouds our knowledge and creates confusion. Very often, larger struggles do not suddenly appear in our lives. They begin with small things that slowly gather strength. A comparison that was entertained repeatedly, an insecurity that was left unquestioned, a thought that was allowed to return again and again. Perhaps this is why many inner struggles can feel difficult to understand. By the time they become visible to us, they have often been growing quietly for a long time. Therefore, O best of the Bharatas, in the very beginning, bring the senses under control and slay this destroyer of knowledge and self-realization. The Gita's advice here is practical. It asks Arjuna to not wait until desire becomes powerful and difficult to control, but instead recognize it early at the point where it first begins entering the mind. Just as it is easier to notice a small spark than to control a fire after it has spread, it is easier to recognize a harmful pattern while it is beginning than after it has quietly taken root within us. Because once something gathers strength, it starts influencing our thoughts, emotions, and choices before we even realize it. Most things that eventually become complex or difficult in our lives rarely begin in dramatic ways. Resentment often begins with a hurt that remained unspoken. Distance in relationships can begin with small moments of neglect. Certain habits begin as occasional choices before slowly becoming patterns. The same is true for our inner world. Thoughts that we repeatedly entertain gradually become stronger. Reactions that we repeatedly justify slowly become habits. This is why awareness matters so much. Awareness creates a pause between impulse and action, a pause where we can step back and ask ourselves, is this truly leading me towards peace? Or am I simply being pulled by a temporary urge? A lot of important choices in life are made in that small space. The difference between reaction and understanding, between regret and clarity, often lies in a few unnoticed moments where we still have the ability to choose. Thought of the day. Take a pause and ask yourself, what thought, desire, or habit has been quietly gaining strength within me? Thank you for joining me on Gita 360. May you discover the awareness to recognize what is entering your mind, the wisdom to guide it gently, and the strength to protect the clarity that already exists within you.